April 28, 1945. A waterlogged field west of Tangermünde, Germany. The world ends not with a bang, but with the relentless, grinding squeal of metal treads. For 19-year-old Anneliese Richter, a Luftwaffenhelferin, the sound is the final note in a symphony of defeat. It's the sound of the American M4 Sherman tanks of the Ninth Army, emerging like steel beasts from the morning mist that clings to the Elbe riverbank. The earth shudders. For 3 days, her flak battery, a mismatched collection of old men from the Volkssturm and girls her own age, has been firing their 88mm guns not at aircraft, but horizontally, as desperate anti-tank weapons. Now there is nothing left to fire. The last shells were spent hours ago. The breech blocks are cold. Anneliese lies flat in the mud of a hastily dug trench, the collar of her gray-blue Luftwaffe greatcoat scratching her chin. The air is thick with the metallic tang of spent cordite and the sweet, cloying smell of churned soil. Rain, a cold, persistent drizzle, has turned the world a uniform gray. You can taste the grit in your teeth. You can feel the bone-deep dampness seeping through the layers of your uniform, a cold that has nothing to do with the weather. Her steel helmet feels impossibly heavy. Beside her, a boy named Klaus, no older than 16, sobs quietly, his Kar 98K rifle abandoned in the muck. Their commanding officer, a one-armed Hauptmann, who lost his limb at Stalingrad, had given them their final order an hour ago. Every man for himself. God be with you. Then he had used his service pistol to ensure he would not be taken. The grinding grows louder, closer. A voice, alien and distorted by a loudspeaker, bellows in English, a language she barely understands. But the tone is universal. It is the language of conquest. Surrender, lay down your arms. The war is over for you. Anneliese's hands tremble, not from cold, but from a primal fear that tightens every muscle. She has heard the stories, the whispers in the barracks, the propaganda posters plastered over every ruin, what the Allies do to German women, what happens to those who wore the uniform, even the auxiliary service gray. She closes her eyes, seeing the faces of her parents in Berlin, wondering if they are even alive. Then they are there, giant figures in olive drab, their faces smeared with grime and exhaustion, their M1 Garand rifles held at a casual, menacing low ready. They move with an economy of motion, a practiced weariness that is more terrifying than any frantic charge. One of them, a sergeant with a square jaw and tired eyes, points a thumb upwards. Raus, out, schnell. The German word sounds clumsy, brutal in his American accent. Anneliese pushes herself up slowly, her knees shaking. Her hands are raised, palms open, an instinctive gesture of submission. The soldier looks at her, his gaze lingering for a moment on the Luftwaffe eagle at our coat, then moving to her face. There is no hatred in his eyes. There is nothing at all. Just a profound, soul-crushing fatigue. She has herded with the others, the handful of boys and old men who remain, towards a collection point near a shattered farmhouse. The Sherman tanks idle nearby, their diesel engines a throaty rumble that vibrates through the soles of her boots. There is no paperwork, no formal process, just a quick search for weapons, a confiscation of a few pathetic souvenirs. She is just one more piece in the vast human debris of a fallen nation. They sit for hours in the rain as more prisoners are brought in, a slow, bedraggled parade of the defeated. No one speaks. The silence is punctuated only by the guttural coughs of the GIs and the endless drip of rain from the splintered rafters of a burned-out barn. As dusk bleeds across the sky, turning the gray clouds to a bruised purple, an American officer with a clipboard approaches their small group of female auxiliaries. He consults his list and points directly at Anneliese. He says something to a corporal standing beside him. The corporal nods, walks over, and gestures with his rifle. You, come. The others watch her go, their faces impassive masks of fear and resignation. She is led away from the main group, towards a small, intact shed behind the farmhouse, whose door is slightly ajar. The darkness inside is absolute.
The hours in the shed bleed into one another, a formless passage of time measured only by the changing quality of the thin light seeping through the cracks in the wooden planks. For Anneliese Richter, it is a coffin of cold and silence. There is no food, no water, only the damp straw on the floor and the gnawing terror in her stomach. She is alone. The separation from the other prisoners felt deliberate, surgical. It is in isolation, she knows, that the worst things happen. Every sound from outside, the rumble of a truck engine starting up, the murmur of American voices, a burst of harsh laughter, sends a fresh spike of adrenaline through her system. You listen, every nerve ending taut, trying to translate the sounds of a foreign army into a language of survival or doom. Is that footstep coming closer? Is this the moment? She tries to make herself small, invisible, curled into a corner with her knees drawn up to her chest. She thinks of the official bulletins, the radio broadcasts by Goebbels that she and her family used to listen to. They spoke of Allied depravity, of a war of annihilation where no German would be spared. They detailed the Morgenthau Plan, the supposed Allied plot to deindustrialize Germany and turn it into a pasture. Propaganda, perhaps, but in this cold, dark shed, with the victor's army just outside the door, the propaganda feels terrifyingly real. Why her? Why was she singled out? Was it her work in the signals unit? Did they think she was a spy, an important party member? She was nobody, a girl who had been drafted into the auxiliaries 2 years ago, taught to read radio intercepts and plot aircraft coordinates, a tiny, insignificant cog in a war machine that had now been smashed to pieces. Sometime in what she guesses is the late morning of the next day, the door scrapes open. The sudden daylight is blinding. A shape fills the doorway, a tall American soldier, his silhouette framed against the gray sky. He is holding a tin cup of something that steams. "Here," he says, his voice flat. He thrusts it at her. It's coffee. Bitter, watery, but hot. The warmth spreads through her trembling hands, a small, shocking act of humanity that only deepens her confusion. He watches her drink, his expression unreadable. Then he gestures with his head. Outside. Now. She follows him out into the muddy farmyard. A standard American military truck, a GMC CCKW 2.5 ton, is parked nearby, its engine idling with a throaty cough. Its canvas cover is pulled taut over the back, concealing whatever or whoever is inside. 2 armed guards stand near the tailgate, their rifles slung over their shoulders. They look bored. An officer, a young lieutenant with an impossibly clean uniform, is waiting for her. He doesn't look at her, but at a piece of paper in his hand. He speaks to a different soldier, one with sergeant stripes, who seemed to know a few words of German. The sergeant turns to Anneliese. His German is rough, functional. "Name: Richter Anneliese." She nods, her throat too tight to speak. "You will go in truck," the sergeant says, pointing at the GMC. There is no explanation, no destination given, just a command. The finality in his tone is chilling. This is not a question. It is a sentence. Her mind races, assembling the facts into the only logical, terrifying conclusion. A lone prisoner, separated from the others. No processing, no Red Cross registration. A discreet truck with armed guards. She has heard the term used by soldiers on leave from the Eastern Front. Sonderbehandlung, special treatment. A euphemism for summary execution. They are taking her somewhere quiet. A ditch, a forest clearing. A place where the noise of a single rifle shot would be swallowed by the vast, indifferent German landscape. The fear is no longer a sharp spike, but a cold, heavy presence that settles deep in her bones. The American corporal beside the tailgate motions for her to climb up. He makes a small, impatient gesture. Get in the truck. Her legs feel like lead. Each step towards the vehicle is a step towards the end of her life. She places a hand on the cold, wet metal of the tailgate, her knuckles white. This is it. This is how it ends.
The inside of the truck is a world of shadows and jolting motion. Anneliese sits on a hard wooden bench that runs along one side of the covered bed. Opposite her sits one of the guards, a private first class, no older than she is, with a fuzz of blonde hair escaping from under his helmet. His M1 Garand and the creak of the canvas cover straining against its frame. The air smells of diesel, wet canvas, and stale cigarette smoke. You try to read the faces of your captors. You search for a flicker of malice, of pity, of anything other than this profound, unnerving indifference. But their faces are masks, honed by months of combat and exhaustion. They are simply doing a job. She is not a person to them. She is cargo, a piece of an administrative puzzle they have been ordered to solve. This professional detachment is more terrifying than open hostility. It suggests a process, a routine. It suggests this is not the first time they have taken someone on a one-way ride. Anneliese presses herself into the corner, trying to make herself smaller, less of a target. The canvas walls of the truck are her entire world, a swaying, claustrophobic prison. She tries to track their direction. Through a small gap in the canvas, she can see the sun, a pale, watery disk in the overcast sky. They are heading east, towards the Elbe, towards the Russians. The thought sends a fresh wave of panic through her.
Stories of what the Red Army did were more than propaganda. They were whispered eyewitness accounts from the flood of refugees pouring west. To be handed over to them was a fate worse than a quick bullet. Or perhaps they weren't going to the river. Perhaps they were heading for the dense forests that bordered the plains, the dark, quiet woods that had hidden partisans and runaway soldiers, and were now perfect for hiding graves. The truck rumbles on, its speed steady, relentless. They pass through the ghost of a village, its buildings hollowed out by artillery, roofs caved in, streets littered with debris. A child's doll, its face cracked and dirty, lies in the gutter. The sight is so pitiful, so mundane in its horror, that it almost breaks her composure. She sees columns of her own people trudging along the roadside. Women, children, old men, pushing handcarts piled high with their meager possessions. They are wraiths in a dead land. They look at the American truck with a mixture of fear and envy, and then their eyes fall on her, a German girl in a German uniform, a prisoner of the enemy. Their faces show nothing. They are too consumed by their own survival to have pity for hers. The journey feels endless. An hour passes, then two. The sheer, monotonous dread is a physical weight. It's an ache in her chest, a sour taste in my mouth. Her mind begins to play tricks on her. Every time the truck slows, she braces herself. Is this the place? Every time it bumps over a particularly rough patch of road, she imagines they are turning off the main track, heading down a dirt lane into the trees. She rehearses her final moments. Will she beg? Will she pray? Will she try to be brave, like the heroines in the UFA films? Or will she simply fall apart? The young guard across from her shifts his weight. He pulls a crumpled pack of Lucky Strike cigarettes from his pocket, taps one out, and puts it between his lips. He doesn't light it. He just sits there, the unlit cigarette dangling from his mouth, his eyes still fixed on the road behind them. The small, incomplete gesture of normality is somehow the most unnerving thing of all. The truck continues its eastward path, deeper into the collapsing heart of the Reich, carrying her towards a destination she is certain she will never leave.
The landscape remains a portrait of desolation. The truck continues its steady, grinding pace, a metronome marking the final minutes of Anneliese Richter's life. By her estimation, they have been driving for nearly 3 hours. The sun, a weak spot in the gray blanket of cloud, has begun its slow descent towards the west, meaning it is now mid-afternoon. They have traveled far, far enough from the main prisoner collection point that no one would know where she had been taken, far enough for anything to happen without witnesses. Her hope, a tiny flickering ember, has all but died. There is only a numb resignation left, a weary acceptance of the inevitable. The forest they are passing now is thicker, the trees taller, casting long, dark shadows across the road. This, she thinks, this is the place. It looks like so many of the woods near her childhood home, a peaceful place meant for picnics and walks, now poised to become her grave. The truck's engine suddenly changes its pitch. The driver shifts down through the gears with a heavy crunch. The vehicle slows dramatically, not with the gentle deceleration for a curve, but with a deliberate application of the brakes. Anneliese's heart hammers against her ribs. The guard opposite her finally moves. He takes the unlit cigarette from his lips and stows it carefully back in its pack. He straightens up, his hand resting on the stock of his Garand. This is the moment. The truck lurches not onto a side path, not into the woods, but into a sharp 90-degree turn at a junction she hadn't seen coming, a crossroads marked by a leaning, shell-splintered signpost. For a few disorienting seconds, she cannot process the change. Her body, tensed for the end, remains rigid, but her mind, desperately clinging to any scrap of information, registers a fundamental shift. The light coming through the gap in the canvas has changed. The pale sun is no longer behind them or to their right. It is now directly in front of them, shining weakly through the windscreen of the cab and filtering back into the dark truck bed. They are no longer heading east. They are heading west. You feel the change before you understand it. It is a subtle shift in the physics of the journey, a reorientation of your entire world. West. They are driving west, away from the Alba, away from the Russians, away from the deep, dark forests. They are driving back towards the American lines, back towards the territory they already control. It makes no sense. Why drive for hours in one direction only to turn around and go back?
It is illogical. An execution is a simple, efficient act. You find a quiet spot and you do it. This long, meandering journey, culminating in a complete reversal of direction, is not efficient. It is something else entirely. For the first time in hours, a feeling other than terror enters her mind. Profound, bewildering confusion. Her carefully constructed narrative of imminent death begins to crumble. The pieces no longer fit. The truck picks up speed again, settling into a steady rhythm on this new road, which feels smoother, better maintained. She risks a glance at the guard. His posture has changed. He is no longer ramrod straight, but slightly slouched. He seems more relaxed, his hand now resting loosely on his knee, not on his weapon. He catches her eye for a fraction of a second, and in that moment she sees not a killer, not an executioner, but a tired boy, barely out of his teens, bored on a long transport assignment. He looks away, back to the canvas flap, but the spell of absolute menace has been broken. Annalise remains terrified, but a new element has been introduced into the equation: doubt. The destination is no longer a certainty. The road ahead is once again unknown, and for the first time since she was ordered into the truck, the unknown feels marginally better than the known. The truck rumbles on, west, into the fading afternoon light, carrying her not towards an ending, but towards a question mark.
The journey west continues for another 30 minutes. The landscape begins to change. The endless fields of mud and shattered farmhouses give way to signs of a more organized military presence. They pass convoys of supply trucks heading in the opposite direction, their drivers giving lazy waves to the guards in Annalise's vehicle. They pass makeshift motor pools, rows of jeeps and command cars parked beneath camouflage netting. The air begins to carry a different smell, not just damp earth and cordite, but antiseptic and ether, a scent so faint she at first thinks she is imagining it. Then the truck slows again, this time turning onto a wider, gravel-paved access road. A large, hand-painted sign comes into view. The English words are stark: 120th Evacuation Hospital. Annalise stares at the sign, her mind struggling to comprehend. An evacuation hospital. Not a prison camp, not an interrogation center, a hospital. The truck rolls past a checkpoint manned by military police who wave them through without stopping, and then she sees it. A sprawling city of tents, hundreds of them, laid out in neat, orderly rows. Olive drab canvas tents stretching as far as the eye can see, marked with large, unmistakable red crosses. The area is a hive of frantic, purposeful activity. Ambulances, their sides caked with mud, arrive in a steady stream, disgorging stretchers. Medical personnel, doctors in white coats, nurses in drab fatigues, hurry between tents. The low collective moan of human suffering is a constant, audible presence, a sound that underlies the engine noise and the shouted orders. The truck pulls to a stop in a designated parking area. The tailgate has dropped with a loud clang. Out, the guard says, the single word lacking any of its earlier menace. Annalise slides off the bench, her legs stiff and unsteady. She hops down onto the gravel, blinking in the gray afternoon light. The sheer scale of the operation is overwhelming. She sees wounded men everywhere. Men on stretchers, men limping with makeshift crutches, men sitting on the ground with bandaged heads, their faces wearing the 1,000-yard stare of shock and trauma. And then she notices something else. Not all of them are in American uniforms. In a segregated area, she sees men in the Feldgrau of the Wehrmacht and the dark blue of the Kriegsmarine, wounded Germans being treated alongside wounded Americans. An American officer, a major with the caduceus insignia of the medical corps on his collar, approaches them. He is older, with gray at his temples and a deeply weary look in his eyes. He is accompanied by a woman in a Red Cross uniform. The major glances at Annalise, then at a clipboard in his hand, and speaks to the woman in rapid English. The woman turns to Annalise and addresses her in perfect, unaccented German. "You are Flockhilverin Annalise Richter." Annalise can only nod, her voice gone. "My name is Frau Neumann. I am with the International Red Cross," the woman says, her tone calm and professional. "Major Davies wishes to inform you of your situation." She continues, explaining the incomprehensible. "Before the war, your records indicate you completed 2 years of study at the University of Berlin Medical Faculty before your auxiliary service. Is this correct?" Again, a nod. "Our medical facilities are completely overwhelmed," Frau Neumann explains, gesturing to the controlled chaos around them. "We have thousands of wounded, Allied and German, and not enough personnel to process them, to even keep their records straight. We are short on translators, clerical staff, anyone with any medical training whatsoever,
Your name was on a list of prisoners with potentially useful skills. The major says something else. Frau Neumann translates. You will be assigned to the patient administration tent. You will help us triage records, translate for the German wounded, and maintain patient logs. You are still a prisoner of war, but you will work here. You will be given food and a bunk in a segregated female barracks. Do you understand? Annalise looks from the woman's compassionate face to the weary major, to the endless rows of tents filled with broken men from both sides of a meaningless war. The journey, the fear, the certainty of death, it all collapses into this one stunning moment of revelation. They weren't taking her to a forest to be shot. They were taking her here, to work, to help, to be useful. The fear that has been her constant companion for days finally breaks, and a wave of relief so profound, so dizzying, washes over her that her knees buckle. She doesn't fall. The Red Cross worker steadies her with a hand on her arm. She is not being taken to her death. She is being brought back, in the most unexpected way imaginable, into the world of the living.